Noon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, the new housing starts are dropping fast, like depleting to a point in which that the economy is not going to recover in any kind of significant fashion until you see the housing starts not only make up for the fact that they are not keeping up inside of the production scenario as far as the demand for homes in the population that is growing into the future. There is simply not enough new construction, new housing starts, and it is quite evident within the lumber market. I have shared this information so many times, and I have repeated those words time and time again on my channel, and it's only coming to fruition to see it happening now. It's like obvious to me when I look at the lumber industry, when I look at the demand for it, when I look at the prices, and then I see the permit issuance falling. It is very little doubt in my mind what it is that's actually happening out here. So many people want to look at the administration to be the problem, and there is a lot that you can point at to say, hey man, this is the reason, this is the cause, but most of the time you're going to find that those are symptoms to an underlying economic force. When I have the ability to call out the lumber market as easily as I do, and people then wonder how it is that I can do it, and I think to myself, anybody could do this. Anybody could look at the underlying economic force, apply it to their understanding of their industry that they are in, and then be able to call it out as easily as I have been able to do it with lumber. I mean, here it is. Lumber's trading at $528 per thousand. It's going to close here next week. $528 per thousand is about as cheap as you could ever possibly imagine it. Like, other people are going to say, oh no, it's still way expensive. It needs to get a lot cheaper. And I think to myself, I don't know where it is that you're getting lumber, but the lumber futures price is now at $528 per thousand, and I'm selling 2x4s cheaper than I was selling them back in 2018. That's the case with the lumber. It is incredibly cheap. It is a devastated market. There's a lot of mill curtailment, shutdowns, inventory depletions, and I have been sharing that for quite some time here on this channel. And I said it's quite evident that this is going to be taking place if you do not see demand coming from the builders. And what do you see coming from the builders? A lack of demand. That's evident, again, within the new starts. I left links down in the description to this stuff. When you want to look at things like interest rates and then use that for monetary policy adjustments, how it is that people are going to react within their investments, how it is that people are going to determine what it is that's going to be taking place with their mortgages, right? When people focus in on the interest rates and they're so like, when is it that the Fed is going to adjust, when, all this stuff, they are literally in the monetary policy itself. They are, right? They are the monetary policy. As the people's attention gets focused in on that and they think, okay, what is the Fed going to say? What is it that Donald Trump is going to do when he puts the new chairman in? How is it that Myron, the new Fed official, is going to be, changing monetary policy? When people look at it in this fashion, this is exactly how they control the scenario. They control the narrative and they can control the outcome. It's not about the interest rate adjustment. See, here it is. I think it's funny. Mortgage rates are already starting to come down based on this idea that there's going to be a $200 billion buy-in to the mortgages. And when I think about how they're going to put $200 billion into these mortgages, and all of a sudden there's going to be this drop in mortgage interest rates, mortgage rates, I think to myself, $200 billion, is that a lot? I mean, quantitative easing was trillions of dollars. But a few $100 billion inside of the mortgage market is all of a sudden going to be some sort of big deal? Well, when you start looking into it psychologically, it is a big deal. Look what's happening with mortgages already. You're starting to see the mortgage interest rates start to fall, just based on the credible threat of it. See, this is how come it's so easy to start seeing what it is that's taking place within the economy, because once you look at it from a credible threat theory, then you look at it from the psychological point of view. What is this going to do to the behavior of the market? How is it that people interpret the information? See, the awesome thing about the credible threat theory is that once you have seen it, you realize that nobody else understands what it is that's happening out there because they're being gaslit. Right? Look at here. Look at these interests. If the interest rates would fall, if Jerome Powell wasn't there, if there was, a better Federal Reserve chairman or something of this nature, you would have lower interest rates in the mortgages, and then everybody would be able to buy a home. I mean, that's literally what, I don't know literally exactly word for word, but that's essentially what Donald Trump was saying. All right? If we get rid of Jerome Powell, we could lower the interest rates, and the mortgages would be cheaper for everybody to buy a house. Well, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates and mortgage rates went up. Here it is. They haven't done anything with interest rates yet. They got an interest rate adjustment coming, or maybe, right? And that you got mortgages falling based on the expectations of a $200 billion buy-in. You see how the credible threat theory works? It works so easy. I think to myself, $200 billion, is that really that much? I mean, it might be all if you did it in one shot, ran right out there and spent all $200 billion in one moment. But ultimately, the quantitative easing programs from the great financial crisis to today has been far, far more inside of the mortgage market as far as buying up mortgage-backed securities than the $200 billion idea. Don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money. And psychologically, it probably have a decent impact on it. But the reality of it is probably not that much. Right? See, this is the unfortunateness we now face. Even the idea of tariffs. I love the idea that the Supreme Court backed off on the idea of determining whether or not those tariffs are legal. Whether they didn't strike them down today. Essentially, they were going to come up with the determination today on whether or not that these tariffs were going to be, legal or not to continue on with. And they said, oh, we're not going to do it today. And I'm thinking, man, no way. Push the credible threat yet again. So now you got the definite credible threat of there being an issue with the tariffs going into the future. And what do you see? All the corporations, not all of them, but a bunch of corporations running out there, filing lawsuits, getting ready for refunds. Now, I wonder, how easy was it for me to see that way back before Donald Trump even took office? I said it then. What tariffs? I've been saying it the whole time. What tariffs? These tariffs that are going to be deemed illegal, struck down, and having to be reversed or essentially reimbursed, right, for all the payments that were going to go out to all the people and give all the wonderfulness to them. That all has to be undone. Meanwhile, all the prices went up. That seems very strange to a lot of people, but it doesn't seem very strange when you knew that was going to be the case from the beginning. Ever-increasing amounts of inflation and inflation expectation that keeps the neutral interest rate elevated, keeps the Fed funds rate elevated. I've been saying this for years, long before Trump was in office. Again. And so to see it as easily as that, to say, hey, you can't really create an inflation expectation without breaking the supply chain. One way or the other, whether you expect it to be broken or you literally break it by calling out these tariffs, create new partnerships throughout the globe, and then say, oh, I'm sorry, the tariffs were deemed illegal. We got to go back to the way it was. Well, the partnerships have already been destroyed. The inflationary expectations have already been pushed into the economy. Job well done. Nobody knows why that would be the case, why they would want to do that. But if you look at it from the neutral interest rate being too low for too long, interfering with monetary policy, and the only way to get that neutral interest rate up off the lower bound of zero, or near the zero lower bound, is to raise the inflation expectations. The only way to do that is to sever the supply chain. They couldn't do it with quantitative easing. This is what's crazy about it. All the money printing of quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, and 4, failed to produce an inflationary scenario for the Federal Reserve. People say, how dumb is it to not be able to tell that when the money printer go burr, prices go up? I mean, that's the simplest thing in the world to see, but then those people cannot possibly answer the question of why it is that the monetary policy was failing the Federal Reserve with too low of an interest rate after the quantitative easing of 1, 2, 3, and 4 after the great financial crisis. I mean, it took the Fed's balance sheet of $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion. On a percentage basis, it was far more money printing that was taking place back during the great financial crisis than was taking place during COVID. And yet, it didn't produce inflation. It missed the inflationary scenario. You were trying to get to 2%, they hardly got there. And they were pulling their hair out, trying to figure out what it is that they were going to do to create an inflationary scenario, a reflationary shock to the economy. Like, these are things that I've reported on that came directly from the Federal Reserve. So when I saw the inflationary pressure start to hit the economy, I'm like, wow, this is a total benefit for the Fed. And then everybody started screaming at the Fed for making a mistake, and I'm like, I don't think so. There's no mistake being made. They are getting off the lower bound of zero. They are raising the neutral interest rate. Is there a lot of pain and suffering on account of it? You bet. They knew that that was going to be the case. They knew it was going to be a painful experience for the people at the end of the line who were suffering with lost wages and incomes, that they would suffer the most. However, if they didn't do it, it was going to be pain and suffering for everybody. And you know, when you see this coming directly from the Fed itself, you don't look at anything else. You're like, okay, fine. You guys are desperate for an inflationary scenario, so if you happen to get it, you did it on purpose. How are you going to do it? Let's see it. Let's see how you guys are going to do this. Remember, John Williams was talking about it back in 2018, long before COVID. Having an inflation that run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time to make up for the fact that they failed to achieve that 2% target. And they were going to call it average inflation targeting. And more specifically, asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting. All planned before COVID. Isn't hard for me to see it. So when I saw how it is that the administration came in and was just like 100% tariffs, 150 billion, look at all this list of tariffs that we're going to do, and I'm like, you're going to keep that inflation expectations rolling, ain't you? And it worked. It's totally working. All the people raise the prices, all the people have expected it, all the wage increases, all the severing of the partnerships and rebuilding of those distribution networks because of these tariffs, only to find them to be illegal. All right? And then the Supreme Court says, oh, well, we're not going to decide whether or not they're legal or not. So you're going to have to just pretend that they are. Go ahead. Keep making the payments. Keep doing the thing. You see what's happened here? This is absolutely incredible on what it is that the Federal Reserve was looking for, asking for, and what it is that they actually received in this economy. How it is that it's caused so much pain and suffering for the average everyday person, watching them fall further and further away from the ability to achieve that of what was considered the American dream, becoming property owners, having a decent life off of a decent wage. Now you're watching the good jobs just fall further and further down the line, having less ability to provide for themselves, provide for a family, provide for a way of life that just seemed so reasonable back in the day, but now it seems unreasonable. Here it is. We wonder why it's taken place, and I think to myself, it's not on account of the new money. You don't think the ever-increasing amounts of new money that pours into the system that separates the rich from the poor might be doing it? People say, oh man, what do we need to do about this homeless? Well, maybe if we throw hundreds of millions of dollars into Portland's homelessness issue, we can solve the problem, and it only got worse, and they scratch their heads and wonder why. And I think to myself, dude, maybe it's the new money? The ever-increasing amounts of it that this pours into the system, diving into luxurious experiences, separating the rich from the poor? This is not hard to understand. There's going to be a group of people out there who are going to hold back on their expenditures so that they can secure a decent rate of interest beyond that of their occupation. Do you want to blame people for doing that? Like, honestly, if I gave you a situation, I told you, it was just like, hey man, you got one of two paths. You can either take your time, putting money into a secure rate of interest beyond that of your occupation, or you can just go and blast it. What do you want to do? Right? And people are like, well, you got to live, man. You only live once, YOLO, right? And they go and blast it. And the other person says, well, you know what? I think I might hold on to it. I might hold back on my expenditures so that I can secure a decent rate of interest beyond that of my occupation. And then they find themselves ever increasingly further up the wedge. And then other people go, oh, man, you did that. And it's now bad and it's evil and it's wrong. And you need to pay me because I didn't do that. Like, that's literally the mindsets of the people now. We have two economies happening here. You got the people who are never going to be able to achieve anything with their day job anymore because this is not the economy in which that works in. And then you got other people who have been able to position themselves inside of assets that have blown up in value. That's the unfortunate circumstances we now face. And so as people want it to be the way it was, it's not going to be that way. And as much as people want to blame those who have secured themselves a decent rate of interest beyond that of their occupation by moving into asset allocation, as opposed to partying on a good time, then you're going to find that there's two economies happening here because the asset allocation are now the consumers. It's not the working class with their jobs. They used to be the consumer. That's why you find it so weird of an economy now. It's because the working class individual used to be the consumer. When they worked, that created consumption. Now, whether they work or don't work, it doesn't really participate in the consumption like the top 10, 20% of the top 10 and 20% of household incomes. Those are the asset holders. They're the ones who are the consumers. You see why it's split? This is the K economy. It's not hard to see it. It's once you see it and recognize it, it's not difficult. See, that's what's funny is that lumber used to be like a working class product. Think about that. Lumber used to be a working class product. Now it's a luxurious item. What is it building? Luxurious items. It's not building a little home for raising families. It's building an asset of value to be then sold out there on the market. It's a luxurious experience. Right? Granite countertops and awesome flooring and fancy window coverings and all the stuff that goes with it. It's not just lumber. Lumber is the piece that puts it together. It's the component, the key component to it all. And you're seeing it every day. You're watching it get further and further away from the ability for most people to acquire what it is that they need in their life to have that. They can't get it together. They're riddled with student loan debt. They have issues with trying to find a place to live and save. They're not able to acquire what it is that they need in their life to meet that next level. It's like every year it's going to get harder and harder. And then they wonder why. They wonder what it is that they need to do. And then they wait the next year and they say, maybe next year it'll be better. And then it gets harder. And the next year, maybe it'll get better. And then it got harder. Right? And then meanwhile, there was other people out there going, man, I'm sorry, I can't go out. I can't go out tonight. I don't have the money. And they're like, what are you doing with your money? You got so much money. And it was like, I'm securing a decent rate of interest beyond that of my occupation. And they find themselves further and further up the wedge, and their buddies are down there going, what's going on here? It's happening so fast now that people are it's making their heads spin. Like even I myself am recognizing that just from the simple position of being in silver, right? Like having watched that silver position do as well as it has over the last few weeks, I think to myself, man, how many people do I know who had been in silver, who have been waiting for this moment? All of a sudden they have an asset that just jumped up in value. Well, if they had been positioning themselves in everything out there that had value to it that would increase over time, they would find themselves in that same position that the silver has done for them. And this is really where a lot of people are missing it. They're hoping and wishing and dreaming that their day job is going to be enough. They went and got a degree to make sure that they had a job that was going to pay enough. And that wasn't the way that it should have been done. They should have gone into acquiring money. Now, don't get me wrong, going and getting a job that pays more, hey, that's awesome. But if it locks you into an interest payment that you're never going to be able to pay off, or then holds you back from the ability to then progress through life because you have interest debt that's holding you back and accumulating more and more every year, this is a problem that people don't realize. They thought, man, if I have the degree, I'm going to have a better way of life. But they only found out that by having the degree, it actually deterred them from being able to acquire that what it is that is available to somebody who doesn't have a degree, simply from the debt issuance that they had acquired, right? Being bad credit and not enough payment and all that. And so I think about what it is that people are needing in their life. They really need to understand that you got to cut back on your expenses as much as possible in order to position yourself into a secure rate of interest beyond that of the occupation. That's it. Any other move, like however creative you can get at it. But the more you take on debt, the less likely you are to be able to take on assets that are going to be able to pay enough to pay off the debt and then some. Like if you have debt, that's the only investment that you should be paying on. Asset allocation is not a problem. Is not even something you should even think about. So if you're not in asset allocation, where are you? You're down on the bottom side of the wedge, trying to pay off the debt. You see the problem with that? Like I don't know how many other people see it like that. If you have debt, there is no better investment than to paying off your debt. Okay? If you are not acquiring assets, you are going to be on the bottom side of the wedge. Which one are you going to do? Right? Like you have a choice in life. Which one is it that you're going to do? Are you going to jump into massive debt, try to get the degree and then pay that debt off? Or are you going to jump right into asset allocation? Like you can get creative. You go and get the degree and all that other stuff and pay that thing off fast and hurry so that you can start moving into asset allocation. But if you do not have the plan to be in asset allocation first, using that on the path to get there, then you're going to fail. And that's the problem we face. That's the two economies that we are working in. And it's sad to see it, but it's obvious now. You know, look at what they're doing out there. There's nothing that they can do to really create an environment that is going to better the working class individual. There's no returning of manufacturing back to this nation in a way that we are going to be so productive we can sell our production to the rest of the world. In fact, what we're going to end up finding is that there's going to be issues that take place to such a magnitude that it's going to create even more problems here in the United States because we have severed the supply chain that comes into the United States with those partnerships. See, I think about the lumber itself. Think about it. If Canada finds a new partnership where they find somebody else to buy that lumber, buy their forestry products from them, and they're not selling it to the United States, what happens to the United States? Well, the United States has to manufacture their own. The problem with manufacturing our own is that we can produce as much as we want. Not a problem. We can produce as much as we want. We got the forestry industry, we got the timber. We can set up the mills. We can make it happen. You know what we can't do is do it in a way that is going to be cheap enough, that is going to be competitive to what it is that Canada was bringing in. So we can produce it all, yeah, no problem. It's going to be real expensive. Real expensive. And if people were complaining about the price of lumber now, they ain't seen nothing yet. When the demand starts to pick up, the prices are going to explode. Let's read some comments. Man, I am just babbling on here. All right. The right hemisphere is not in alignment. Small businesses live off of debt. Yeah, they sure do. University caused debt, and I geared so far from the major to what ultimately became my career. Huh. Right. What worries me is that reasoning alphabetically, the situation subsequent to a K-shaped economy is an L-shaped economy. Yeah, and it really is. It's more of an L shape, but I don't even like, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it anymore because it's just a split in the system. It's a split in a way that ultimately this shouldn't exist. Like when the U.S. when the United States went off the gold standard, we went on to a pure fiat currency using the U.S. Treasuries in place of gold. That shouldn't have existed. And right now, the trust of it shouldn't be taking place. The fact that it has increased the money supply. Ever increasing amounts of new money separates the rich from the poor. We learned this so many times by reading through Cantillon essay on economic theory that it's like you can't really see it any other way, right? If there's new money in the system, you're going to have separation. That's why I find it so funny that it was like, they're like, oh man, what is it we need to do for homelessness? Well, we need to throw a bunch of new money at it. It's like, okay, go ahead, see what happens. All right. So, like, knowing that there's going to be separation between the rich and the poor every time that you inject new money into the system, every single time this happens. Right. And so when you think, okay, we are now in a situation in which that those U.S. treasuries, which should never have been replacing gold, have replaced gold. Now we have ever increasing amounts of new money. There should have been a redistribution of wealth. When we severed ourselves from the gold standard, that was the prevention of a redistribution of gold. That is exactly what Cantillon described what would happen and what it is that kings do to prevent the outcome, which is the money leaving the nation, is they make it illegal to export gold out of the nation. And then guess what? Exporting gold out of the nation becomes a very profitable business. It's very interesting. You should read, like, he goes in and he, like, calls out one specific group because of that. I'm not going to go into it right here. But that's essentially something he was calling out hundreds of years ago. All right? Now, when we think about what it is that was happening in this nation, there was other nations out there who were asking for their gold back. That was Cantillon's redistribution of the gold back out there to the most industrious nations because we were going to lose our industrious capacity due to the fact that we had a luxurious experience from the rise in the standard of living from our own industrious capacity that was providing the stuff to the world. Like, I can see this so well. Like, I can say it over and over again. I can talk it backwards and forwards every single time because I've read through this so many times and compared it to our situation. It's obvious now. Without that new money pouring in, we all fall into pain and misery, and it's going to be a very painful, miserable experience because we don't produce real goods and services here to meet the standard of living that we now live. We buy our consumption from the world. We produce a lot of stuff, don't get me wrong, but we consume a hell of a lot more of the world than we actually produce here. And so when the time comes and the production of the world stops flowing into the United States, that is going to be horrible. It's going to be a horrible experience. But until the U.S. treasuries are no longer accepted around the globe, to do transactions, to be the safe and liquid asset, the moment that is no longer the case, and I understand BRICS nations are rising and stuff, a little bit of an issue. I mean, but they're so insignificant on the grand scheme of things, and nobody's going to trust them to go into debt deep enough to provide the world with enough safe and liquid assets like the United States has done with the U.S. treasuries. Nobody trusts any other nation to do it. They're like, oh, well, the BRICS nations can just do it. And I'm like, well, they could just do it, but then you have to just believe that everybody's just going to throw their retirement fund and everything else into Chinese bonds. How many people are going to do that? How many people throw their money into U.S. government bonds for their retirement? Everybody. Every insurance company, every retiree, every business, everybody uses U.S. Treasury debt. Right? So there's no competition out there because there's literally nobody out there who trusts anybody else to do what it is that the United States has done because they don't even trust the United States. That's what's funny about it. Right? Like, like, well, the BRICS nations can just do it. I'm like, do you trust the United States to be the debt issuer? And they're like, no. And I was just like, so which one of those BRICS nations do you want to take over that's doing what the United States is doing? Anyone? You want to name one of those nations out there? There isn't. There isn't one, right? There isn't one out there. And that's what I love about this. And even the idea of returning back to the gold standard, that ain't going to happen either, right? And the only way I can prove that is that everybody I know is sitting in US dollars. There's a handful of precious metal holders out there, and there's very few of them are 100% in it. That's how you know. Everybody wants dollars. Everybody's dollar denominated in everything that they have for their assets, their house, their retirements, their 401ks, all that other stuff. It's all in dollars. None of it's priced in gold and none of it's priced in Bitcoin, and very few people have it in 100% that, right? Boy, I am a babbler today. How much time do we have left? Yeah, we got a few more minutes left. All right, the BRICS in aggregate at least 2.5 billion people. All right. You're still wrong on housing. I don't know how I could be wrong on housing. I've only called it out so accurately this entire time, especially through the eyes of the lumber industry. I mean, you can go ahead and call me out, but I mean, I've only been right the entire time, so okay. All right, I know a few farmers that have completely destroyed their land. Farming is the only thing good for the soil. Regenerative. Yeah. I mean, see, the thing about like understanding the economy now is like to understand like the leftover like economy from the working class being the consumer. That's really where I think like a lot of us are. I think we would be somewhat heartbroken to truly understand it because I know I somewhat was when I started really diving into economics. They don't call it the dismal science for nothing. It's very depressive when you think about what it is that's happened and what it is that's happening. When you think about the rise of the industrious people and being able to produce real goods and services and putting that goods and services out there and trading it for gold, man, did we not have it going on? Like, that is a beautiful moment right there. Producing the world's greatest stuff, sending that stuff out there to the world, and the world was sending us their gold. Man, what a great moment. And as you enjoyed the industriousness of the people, right? Everybody around producing all this great stuff, sending it to each other, sending it to the world sending us their gold, and us raising our standard of living on account of it. It was a beautiful moment. One income producing enough for the entire household. You have wife and kids and cars and vacation and college and all the other stuff that went with it. It was a beautiful moment. Right? And then what happens? Well, if you raise that standard of living, what's going to happen is that consumption, that added consumption from all that hard work and that producing of goods and services and sending that out there to the world and raising that standard of living, what ends up occurring from that is a price increase. All the consumption raises the prices. And the foreign competitor says, hey, we don't produce the same stuff at the same quality, but our stuff is not bad. You want to buy it cheaper? And the people say, we sure do. And they do that every single time because that's the Cantillon effect. It's going to happen here, there, everywhere. It doesn't matter where you're at because that's how people behave with their money, is they want cheaper stuff. And when they start buying in the foreign production, the domestic manufacturers start leaving. And that is the case. It takes time. Now, you can blame politicians and greed and all the other stuff that goes with it, and that's fine. But everything that you're describing is literally a symptom because this guy described it first, and what you were doing is trying to reinvent the wheel. How is it that he can call it out hundreds of years before the politicians, before the banks, before all that stuff was going on, unless it was the accurate way of looking at it? He was able to do that long before all the greed and manipulation and corporations and all that other stuff that was happening with the politicians. In fact, he called the politicians out saying they're probably going to behave in that fashion. So here it is, the United States had the greatest standard of living, greatest production, had that gold moving into the nation in an extreme way to raise our standard of living. We all loved it. But then we started losing that production. And there's nothing you can really do to stop it. You can make the laws and try and create the tariffs and all the subsidies and all the other thing that goes along with it, taxes and force and all. Symptoms of the problems of the underlying economic forces of having raised your standard of living and no longer competitive. It's an unfortunate consequence. That's not a beautiful moment. That's a terrifying moment, because now there's nothing we can do. And it's going to fall further and further away from our ability to hold it, keep it. It's like a slippery slope into the abyss. Ever increasing amounts of new money, that's going to make it harder to keep it there. It's going to cause even more separation. It's going to even cause more inequality to take place, and it's going to cause even more of those domestic manufacturers to find other places out there to produce cheaper. Ever increasing amounts of more money of new money coming into the system is what the people beg for. And the only thing it does to them is causes more pain and suffering. They lose ever more of their standard of living, find it ever increasingly harder to try and work for a living, while the asset holders find it ever increasingly easier to increase their consumption. And people wonder, why is this taking place? It's greed and manipulation. I'm thinking, no, it's not. It's the Cantillon effect. It's the result of ever increasing amounts of new money pouring into the system. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Like, stop making the new money. Okay, well, that didn't work. Now what? What are you going to do? You better figure out how it is that you become an asset holder, because those who secure a rate of interest beyond that of their occupation are the ones who end up becoming property owners. That's it. The average everyday person, the consumer of the working class who used to be the person who would go out there and buy a house, they don't exist anymore. There's somebody somewhere out there who might have the option. Most of us don't. And that's what I find interesting. How much time do I have? That's what I love about it, in the sense that once you recognize it, now you have something that you can do about it, because most of the people are going to hope that their day job will be enough, hope that they can earn enough, hope that they can save enough, hope that the interest rates will come, hope that there will be a moment in time that they will then have the ability to do it. They will be hoping the entire time. Then you will have other people out there who recognize that, man, that's probably not going to be my option. I better figure out how to house hack. I better figure out how to partner up with somebody. I better figure out what it is that I need to do that's going to be something of a strategy that is not the normal. Because there's still ways of doing it. And in fact, there's probably better ways of doing it now than there ever has been. But you have to be creative. And you have to understand that it's not going to go down the way that you wanted to. Maybe it will. I don't know. Most likely it's not going to go down the way you wanted to, and that you're going to have to get very creative. Figure out new ways, new avenues, new partnerships, or whatever. But to figure a politician is going to step in and wave a magic wand that can undo the Cantillon effect isn't going to happen. Not in a million years. All right. Okay. You guys are awesome. Thank you all for being here. We got 168 people watching with 57 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Tougher to earn more income this year. Go to gym, get some sunshine, light cigar, have a glass of red wine, and keep striving to improve self. All right, what if Japanese sell treasury? What happens to the dollar? Well, I think it has its moment. Eventually the sell-off or whatever is going to end up coming to an end. But if you have the U.S. treasuries being dumped, you have to think, why is that happening? Like, even another nation out there, when they are when they are getting out of U.S. treasuries, a lot of times it's given like this idea that it's to damage the United States, to punish the United States, or that there's something kind of an issue that they're doing it as an aggression, right? But to understand that the fastest, easiest way to get dollars is to sell U.S. treasuries, right? They're like, I mean, it's the most liquid, deepest market in the world. So if you want cash, instantaneous, right? So if you have debt that is due in dollars, or you have a need for dollars, or there is a demand coming from the need for having dollars for whatever reason it is, selling US treasuries is the fastest way to get into those dollars. And so when I hear people like, oh man, they're getting out of the US treasuries, for what reason? Okay? And then when it comes to Japan right now, like, they faced a consequence for a very long time of running a deflationary scenario. And now that they have an inflationary expectation that is coming to their economy, I think that they're trying to keep that movement, right? Like, they don't want to lose that overall idea of inflationary pressures. China's quite the opposite. You think about it, they're trying to figure out a way to create an inflationary expectation where they have constant deflation now ripping through their economy, creating lack of wage growth and employment falling, and people can't pay their bills, and it's just a sad state. Like, people wonder why it is it that you wouldn't want deflation, and I'm thinking, just look at the economies that go through deflation. Like, there's no, like, you go to work and people are like, oh yeah, here, you can go to work, but we're not going to pay you $15 an hour, we might pay you like 5. People are like, 5. And it was like, well, do you want to work or not? And people are, no. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. What is that? Floor to Records? Floor to Records. Thank you so much for the $5. Thanks for all the work you do, bro. Been watcher since 2022. Well, I thank you very much for the support, man. I really appreciate that $5 and supporting the Uneducated Economist. I know we come out here and we talk some stuff that is a lot different from what it is that you're going to hear just about anywhere else. But I think about it, what we are discussing here and how we view the economy on the Uneducated Economist is literally coming from boots on the ground, working class point of view. So no wonder why it looks and sounds different from just about anything else you're going to hear out there. We're not looking at the economy from 30,000 feet. We're standing on the ground. I'm watching the trucks. I'm looking at the loggers and mill operations and distribution networks. I'm not reading data about what it is that somebody else had lived 30 months ago or 30 days ago. I'm looking at stuff that's happening in real time. I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling people and I'm asking them questions about the industry. So when I think about what it is that we communicate and what it is that we have discovered here on this channel, here on the Uneducated Economist through this point of view, yeah, it's way different from what all those other people are looking at. I still see them getting it wrong when it comes to monetary policy. Nobody, like, very, 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 very few people bring up the neutral interest rate. I don't know why. The neutral interest rate is by far the most important thing you should be discussing with the Fed funds rate. Anybody who brings up the Fed funds rate and then does not talk about the neutral interest rate, I don't know what it is that they're talking about. Like, I cannot possibly comprehend any information that they are giving me if they are not relating the Fed funds rate to the neutral interest rate. Because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the restriction in the economy. That's why they need to adjust it. Where's it at? Right? Because if you're not thinking about where the neutral interest rate is, then how is it that you could possibly talk about the adjustment of the Fed funds rate? There's a relation between the two. And so it's just like every single article I've ever read is just like, nope, not there, not in that one, still not here. And I'm like, okay, they just don't talk about it. I get it. Nobody gonna, don't talk about the neutral interest rate. What time is it? I got like 2 minutes and I gotta go. Imagine 3 nations selling U.S. debt at the same time. Yeah, but even then, right? What are they getting into? If you start selling U.S. treasuries, they're getting dollars. What do they do with their dollars? Unless they are spending those dollars back out there, they're most likely paying off their own debt that they have issued in dollar denomination, right? So what happens? U.S. treasuries get sold. People say, bad thing. But then they get dollars. What does that do to the dollar? It strengthens the dollar up. What happens when they spend that dollars on their debt by paying their debt off? It alleviates dollar denominated debt that was existing out there. That dollar denominated debt was acting like dollars. Those are dollars disappearing from the system. It starts to strengthen the dollar. Right? Did anybody get at that? Right? When they sold their U.S. treasuries, they acquired dollars. That took dollars out of the system when they were selling those treasuries because that's what they acquired. Now, they could spend that, go buy stuff, or they could pay off their debt because most of their debt is done in U.S. dollars as well. And as they pay off their debt that's in U.S. dollars, they are eliminating the U.S. dollar denominated debt that exists out there in the world. And that's literally taking transactable currency out of the system. It's like removing dollars every single time that happens, strengthening the dollar. All and all-knowing, omnipotent being, what is that? Omnipotent? Being wouldn't have a sense of humor. Humor comes by surprise. If God's surprised, then what's that mean? I'm being 14 now. All right. 50 billion of treasuries. Why did the system stop? Well, I mean, 50 billion treasuries is quite a bit, but, you know. I mean, did the system stop? I mean, it was just like, I see banking transactions are still happening here, right? It's just like, when I think about these systems stopping, I'm thinking like, are you talking about a global financial crisis happening on account of it? Or are you talking about a disruption within one economy? Right? Could it bleed over? Could it cause contagion effect? Absolutely. Like I thought that was going to happen from China when China's dollar denominated debt started to collapse within their building, within their their builders. They had, who was it? Evergrande, whatever it was, that huge property developer who had massive corporate debt that was issued in U.S. dollars. And when that stuff couldn't be paid, all the people who had that debt sitting on their balance sheet all of a sudden found themselves falling into debt as well, or falling into default. And so it started creating like this contagion effect on account of the dollar denominated debt that was collapsing in China. Like US dollar denominated debt was collapsing in China that could have created a contagion effect that could spread across the entire globe. Think about it. That doesn't have anything to do with the United States. Right? Actually, that's probably not true. There's probably some bankers that were involved inside of that. But ultimately, this is them creating that situation. Did it happen? I mean, I'm like, holy crap, this could really take place. But then it didn't happen. Like, literally nothing happened. It was contained. I don't know. See, that's where I find it like, something that I thought was interesting, and I thought I really thought she had lost her mind when she said it, is when Janet Yellen said that she don't think that there will ever be another financial crisis in our lifetime. And I was saying a recession. I said that we'll never have another recession in our lifetime, and that's not what she said. What she said was a financial crisis in our lifetime. And so when I thought about that, when we will never have another financial crisis in our lifetime, what I almost assumed because of that is that they will recognize the crisis ahead of time and manufacture it to deal with it. Right? It's like almost like cause the event to take place so that they could deal with the event. Does that almost make sense? Not necessarily like maybe like a problem reaction solution kind of scenario, but more like, here we got this liquidity issue that's going to happen within the banking system. We know that once we raise rates that the asset prices are going to fall. And when that takes place, it's going to cause a liquidity issue within these banking system. Now, everybody knew it. They saw it. I had so many people on my channel come to me and like, dude, are you scared about having your cash in the bank? And I'm like, yeah, no. Why? Because the Federal Reserve has admitted that they recognize that problem and they have the tools to deal with it, but they will not describe what the tools are. Because if they did, then you would incorporate that into, you would just price that right into your investments and your ideas. So they don't tell the people about it. And when I think about what it is that happens when they have like issues like the Silicon Valley Bank crisis that comes up, how quickly they are to react to it, it's like, man, don't tell me you didn't know this was coming. Like, you had the plan to deploy. If you had the plan to deploy, wouldn't it be a plan to deploy it? Like, how do you get the situation to deploy the plan? It's part of it. So anyway, that's the way I kind of see things now, is like, man, if they do see a crisis on the horizon, they will manufacture the crisis to deal with it in such a way that people might not recognize it as being manufactured. But if you look at the response to it, how could it not have been manufactured? Like, create the problem that you now have the solving, situation for. Like, if you create the problem, that is the one that you have a solution for. That why equity valuations are sky high, inflation and more of it. I have a backup plan to have cash, silver, gold, and setback no who is not your friends. Yeah, that's true. Board high power level. All right. See you guys. I got to go. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.